They took a cab and climbed the 4 flights to Sasha's Lower East Side walk-up. She'd lived there 6 years. The place smelled of scented candles, and there was a velvet throw cloth on her sofa bed and lots of pillows and an old color TV with a very good picture, and an array of souvenirs from her travels lining the windowsills: a white seashell, a pair of red dice, a small canister of tiger balm from China, now dried to the texture of rubber, a tiny bonsai tree that she watered faithfully. "Look at this," Alex said. "You've got a tub in the kitchen. I've heard of that. I mean, I've read about it, but I wasn't sure there were any left. The shower thing is new, right? This is a bathtub in the kitchen apartment, right?" "Yep," Sasha said, "but I almost never use it. I shower at the gym." The tub was covered with a fitted board where Sasha stacked her plates. Alex ran his hands under the rim of the bath and examined its clawed feet. Sasha lit her candles, took a bottle of grappa from the kitchen cupboard, and filled 2 small glasses. "I love this place," Alex said. "It feels like old New York. You know this stuff is around, but how do you find it?" Sasha leaned against the tub beside him and took a tiny sip of grappa. It tasted like Xanax. She was trying to remember Alex's age on his profile. 28, she thought, but he seemed younger than that, maybe a lot younger. She saw her apartment as he must see it, a bit of local color that would fade almost instantly into the tumble of adventures that everyone has on first coming to New York. It jarred Sasha to think of herself as a glint in the hazy memories that Alex would struggle to organize a year or 2 from now. Where was that place with the bathtub? Who was that girl? He left the tub to explore the rest of the apartment. To one side of the kitchen was Sasha's bedroom. On the other side, facing the street, was her living room den office, which contained 2 upholstered chairs and the desk she reserved for projects outside of work: publicity for bands she believed in, short reviews for Vibe and Spin, although these had fallen off sharply in recent years. In fact, the whole apartment, which 6 years ago had seemed like a way station to some better place, had ended up solidifying around Sasha, gathering mass and weight until she felt both mired in it and lucky to have it, as if she not only couldn't move on, but didn't want to. Alex leaned over to peer at the tiny collection on her windowsills. He hadn't noticed the tables where she kept the pile of things she'd stolen: the pens, the binoculars, the keys, the child's scarf, which she'd lifted simply by not returning it when it dropped from a little girl's neck as her mother led her by the hand from a Starbucks. Sasha was already seeing Kaz by then, so she recognized the litany of excuses even as they throbbed through her head. Winter is almost over. Children grow so fast. Kids hate scarves. It's too late, they're out the door. I'm embarrassed to return it. I could easily not have seen it fall. In fact, I didn't. I'm just noticing it now. Look, a scarf, a kid's bright yellow scarf with pink stripes. Too bad, who could it belong to? Well, I'll just pick it up and hold it for a minute.
Madeline had become an English major for the purest and dullest of reasons, because she loved to read. The university's British and American literature course catalog was, for Madeline, what its Bergdorf equivalent was for her roommates. A course listing like English 274, Lily's Euphues, excited Madeline the way a pair of Fiorucci cowboy boots did Abby. English 450A, Hawthorne and James, filled Madeline with an expectation of sinful hours in bed that was not unlike the sensation Olivia got from wearing a lycra skirt and leather blazer to danceteria. Right up through her 3rd year of college, Madeline had kept wholesomely taking courses like Victorian fantasy, from Fantastes to the Water Babies. But by senior year, she could no longer ignore the contrast between the blinky people in her Beowulf seminar and the hipsters down the hall reading Maurice Blanchot. Going to college in the money-making 80s lacked a certain radicalism. Semiotics was the first thing that smacked of revolution. It drew a line, it created an elect, it was sophisticated and continental. It dealt with provocative subjects, with torture, sadism, hermaphroditism, with sex and power. Semiotics 211 was limited to 10 students. Of those 10, 8 had taken Introduction to Semiotic Theory. This was visually apparent at the first class meeting. lounging around the seminar table when Madeline came into the room from the wintry weather outside, were 8 people in black T-shirts and ripped black jeans. A few had razored off the necks or sleeves of their T-shirts. There was something creepy about one guy's face. It was like a baby's face that had hideously aged. And it took Madeline a full minute to realize that he'd shaved off his eyebrows. Everyone in the room was so spectral-looking that Madeline's natural healthiness seemed suspect, like a vote for Reagan. She was relieved, therefore, when a big guy in a down jacket and snowmobile boots showed up and took the empty seat next to her. He had a cup of takeout coffee. Zipperstein asked the students to introduce themselves and explain why they were taking the seminar. The boy without eyebrows spoke up first. Let's see. I'm finding it hard to introduce myself, actually, because the whole idea of social introductions is so encoded. Like, if I tell you that my name is Thurston and that I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, will you know who I am? Okay, my name's Thurston, and I'm from Greenwich, Connecticut. I'm taking this course because I read Of Grammatology last summer, and it blew my mind. When it was the turn of the boy next to Madeline, he said in a quiet voice that he was a double major, biology and philosophy, and had never taken the semiotics course before, that his parents had named him Leonard, that it had always seemed pretty handy to have a name, especially when you were being called to dinner, and that if anyone wanted to call him Leonard, he would answer to it.
Was I wrong, or are you indeed pessimistic and disdainful about our cell phone, computer, social media-filled society?
I didn't mean it to be so heavy. I ended up writing about the future a little inadvertently because I wanted to follow Alex, the date, the one-night stand, I guess you would say, from the chapter I just read into the middle of his life. And if we're around 2006 in chapter 1, I didn't really have much of a choice if he's in his early 20s, but to go forward. I imagined playfully, really, that was the spirit in which I intended it. And honestly, I think already that chapter reads as a little bit outdated. I mean, I wrote it pre-iPhone, so I'm imagining toddlers with touch screens, but have you ever watched a toddler on an iPhone? I mean, it's already happened. So I really, no, I would say I'm pretty optimistic. I have a lot of faith in human beings, and I think we all feel a certain anxiety about the role that technology plays in our lives, but I don't know. In the end, I meant it in a playful spirit, not in a somber, scornful way at all.
There's actually a follow-up to that one, and there were a lot of questions about the PowerPoint chapter, and people wanted to know where it came from, and also if you've ever delivered it for an audience.
You know, I haven't. It would actually be fun to try to do that. I've done a short talk about how I came to write in PowerPoint using PowerPoint slides. It's a particular form that is actually very restrictive. You only have 20 seconds between each slide, and they advance automatically. So it's a very sort of rigorous form to work in. It would be interesting to read it with a screen. My urge to write in PowerPoint was very instinctive, which is true of most of the big decisions that I make in writing fiction, and I only later really understand why. So I had an urge to do it, but I had never used PowerPoint, and in fact, I wasn't totally sure what it was. I did learn that I didn't own it when I tried to open PowerPoints on my computer. And I then learned that actually I didn't have enough room to hold it even on my laptop. So my first efforts at PowerPoint were on a yellow legal pad. I drew rectangles and I thought, well, I write by hand, let's go. Did not get too far with that. Once I finally forked over the money to get the extra memory and buy the program and was actually working in PowerPoint, I realized that it's a form that's built around moments and pauses. That's its structure. And in a way, my book is too. It's these, vivid moments of experience separated by gaps in which time goes forward or backward. So in a certain way, PowerPoint is like a microcosm of the book, and it became an interesting way to look at both time and music, two of the big concerns of the book, because the pause is really a moment, both I think in life and in music, when we become very aware of time passing, or of the music having paused and hoping that it will resume. So I think there were all kinds of things that led me to it, and I had a ball working with it, but I have to say it is very difficult because of the lack of continuity, which Microsoft tries to conceal with all kinds of fading and dissolving graphics to give you the impression that one slide is flowing into the next. It's very hard to write fiction with no continuity at all.
Thank you. Jeff, this one's for you, and it's sort of similarly themed. It says you've written that with the noise of TV and the internet, you wanted to read a book where you could feel an actual person on the other side. To what extent is The Marriage Plot that kind of novel?
An actual person on the other side?
Yes. This person's quoting you.
First of all, let me just say that I'm gratified to hear what Jennifer said about writing intuitively, because I work the same way. And I think if you try to sit down with a book and plan everything the first day, all of the decisions you make are kind of predictable, and the reader would find them predictable as well. But to work intuitively as she does, and to have Benny Salazar appear in sort of a walk-on in one chapter, and then to follow that, that's what's so astonishing about her book, is there's no way you could arrive at that book if you were trying to plan it. You'd have to constantly react to what's in front of you as you're working. So I feel a lot less secretly guilty and ashamed of the way I work, because I work quite the same way, in the dark, moving ahead and intuitively. I never thought of The Marriage Plot as a historical novel. When people say that, I cringe. I mean, I was not in college so long ago. It's not historical. I don't remember. And I simply did it then because semiotics is important to the beginning of the story. This book started with a single sentence that goes, Madeline's love troubles had begun at a time when the French theory she was reading deconstructed the very notion of love. And it was this idea of a young woman, perhaps too besotted with the 19th century novel and full of romantic idealism, who wishes to emancipate herself from such idealism by reading Derrida and others. And as she's trying to do that, unfortunately, she falls in love with a boy in the same class. That's where it all began. And then I knew that I could be accurate about the 1980s college experience, and would remember the music. And I didn't need to add an additional layer of difficulty by trying to put these students in a 2011 class. When I've read from this book at colleges, it seems like, in general, the emotional material is exactly the same now as it was. I mean, boyfriends are just as lousy now as they were in 1980. So I didn't think of it as historical, and I also think technology changes, but the emotions often do not change. That little bit I read about waiting for the telephone call. Many people have remarked, well, you wouldn't, that's really such a different time. We never wait for telephone calls. But we do wait in other ways. You could be texting someone. You could have a character now, 20 years old, texting someone else, and it's going well. Lots of texts are coming in. And then suddenly, why don't we meet at the bar? And the text stream stops. And you'd be left in the same tumult of anxiety as Madeline is, waiting for that phone call. So I didn't think, I think, if you wrote about it now, there's always a person on the other side. They're on the other side of a computer or an iPhone, and it's not entirely different.